Hi, my name's Nisha and I'm the YogicAmnesiac. Today we're going to be talking about why you even do yoga, and maybe I'll give you a few tips on how to pick the right practice for yourself. The best place to start with this, I think, would be why do you even do yoga? Or better yet, if you've never done yoga, why you should try it, or maybe a few reasons that you might want to try it. I assume that most people watching this video have probably tried it already, but we're gonna just start from the bare bones and go from there and work our way up. So why should you even do yoga if you've never even done it before? I started when I was really young. My mom would do yoga sometimes and I would join her on occasion, and I knew from a really young age that I did quite like it. I was pretty flexible when I was really young, so I guess that was kind of a bonus for me. Just naturally being able to get into some of the poses really helped get me into it. But that was one of the big reasons I started. The other reason was that in high school I actually got a pretty lame injury in my legs, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't run. I actually couldn't walk very far without hurting. Obviously that eliminated every single sport my school offered except for like swimming, and for some reason I just didn't want to join a competitive swimming team. I also wanted to find something that would help me heal and get over this, and yoga really helped me with that. It was really low impact, so if you have injuries, yoga is actually really good. It's a really good option. And it offered something like, there's only very few poses that I can't do, I think. So yoga was really a way for me to help my body get over this stuff and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I still deal with it to this day, but it's definitely improved the quality of my life. So that was a big reason for me, is just getting over an injury, and I already knew I really liked it. Of course, there were random bonuses apart from just healing my body and already liking it. It actually helped improve my self-esteem. I can be a little bit anxious sometimes, though I wouldn't say I suffer from full-blown anxiety disorder or anything like that, but it helped bring me back and calm me down. Throughout my whole life, even when I wasn't just doing yoga, I could calm down a lot faster. It just helped with a lot of things like that. I felt happier a lot of the time, and it kind of gave me an opportunity to learn about myself and connect with myself in a way that I really hadn't before. Before I get way into why you should be doing yoga, I want to highlight dancers and swimmers really quickly. I want to talk about them in specific because most people are going to assume that dancers are naturally good at yoga, but I would like to point out that that's not true. While dancers are often very good at yoga, they also have a tendency to hyperextend their knees or overarch their backs in certain poses, which is the complete opposite of what most yoga instructors will want. These tendencies are actually the same thing that cause most dancers injuries. It's pretty much based on your joint being too flexible for how strong it is, and it's kind of complicated to get into. But if you know anything about those kind of injuries, you'll understand just how important the balance between flexibility and strength is, and not necessarily pushing your flexibility when you shouldn't be. That being said, I highly recommend dancers take up some form of yoga. It could help counteract any injuries or possible injuries you could be facing, so, if you're a dancer, definitely think about it. I wanted to bring up swimmers because it might seem random, but most swimmers are actually pretty good at yoga naturally. I think it has to do with the fact that they're constantly strengthening really weird muscles in their body that we didn't even know existed half the time. And they're also pretty flexible. They're constantly forced to use their bodies in really interesting ways, but it's still really good for them. If you've ever seen a swimmer explain a butterfly stroke on land, you might think it looks really awkward, but it just proves that they have a really good range of flexibility in their spine and pelvis. On top of this really good range of flexibility that swimmers have, they're also super strong, which really helps out. So if you didn't figure it out, I used swimmers and dancers to highlight just how important that balance is between strength and flexibility. And that's a really big focus in yoga. You'll notice that if you're super flexible but you're not strong, you're actually going to struggle. And if you're super strong but not flexible, you'll actually struggle the same amount probably, just with different poses. Since this balance is so important, obviously that's what you work on when you do yoga. So you're not just targeting strength like you would in weightlifting, or flexibility like you would if you just stretched every day. It's a really good balance between the two, and that balance helps prevent injuries. I'm also going to take this moment to do a random aside and point out that doing yoga for people in the military before they're deployed actually helps reduce the rate of PTSD and trauma that they experience when they come home from their deployment. So all this serious stuff aside, another really good reason to do yoga is because you honestly just like it. That's probably the biggest reason I do yoga. I mean, sure, it helps with my injuries and stuff, but I'd still be doing it even if I was not injured. I always say, doing something just because you like it is an act of yoga in and of itself. To finish off this list of why yoga is so great, I'm going to mention just self-esteem and anxiety. There's a really long list and I could go on forever, but I just wanted to list a few things of why you should try it. So self-esteem. You're actually forced to be really open, and people who do yoga generally report feeling higher self-esteem, which helps counteract depression too, in fact. A lot of this self-esteem boost comes from the fact that you have to be really open with yourself, your instructor, and the people around you. You're forced to just be yourself, especially in a group if you do yoga in person. But doing yoga by yourself actually has really similar benefits to doing it in a group, so there's nothing wrong with using a video. It could still improve your self-esteem. Lastly, I'm going to mention anxiety. Yoga has a super big calming effect, which I think most people already know about, but we're going to talk about it anyway. I know occasionally I get super anxious. I don't have an anxiety disorder, I don't think, but I'm probably more anxious than the average person, and I absolutely hate getting adrenaline rushes. Because of this, it's really important for me to be able to feel calm most of the time. And yoga's really helped with that. I don't know if there's much else to say except for the fact that I'm really living proof, but there are reports out there if you want to look at it too. Long story short, apart from just calming you in the moment, a lot of these effects carry over, and yoga will give you the tools to help calm yourself when an anxiety attack is on the way, or if you're just feeling generally anxious. Maybe it won't be able to prevent it every single time, but it can also just help bring you back to a nice, level middle ground so that you don't feel like you're gonna have a panic attack anymore. And with that, we are done talking about why you should do yoga or why you may already do yoga. You know why I do yoga, so let me know why you do yoga, or at least think about it, because this is going to be really important to the second part of this video, how to choose the right practice. Real quick, I'd just like to mention that on this channel, most of the routines we're going to be doing, while they should be available to me and my body, they're not targeting me. So I will be making routines for other people, and I'll try to be as open as I can and make routines for this kind of person, even if I think that it's a sort of weird routine. Most of the time I'll pick routines that I think feel really good, but I'll definitely talk to people I know on the outside or you guys, and we'll put together routines that are for you, not just for me. I'd also like to say there are some poses I can't do, but I will still do videos about them, and I'll have someone come in and demonstrate them properly so that you can still know what you're doing. Just because I can't do it doesn't mean I shouldn't be teaching you how to do it properly and safely. Okay, let's move forward and get all these randoms asides out of the way. I don't want this video to get too long, so I'll try to run through this at a pretty decent pace, and I'll try not to gloss over anything. Being a beginner at yoga does not mean you need a beginner level practice. I know people who are super strong already know how to stand with really good alignment just because they've been weightlifting or they have been training for a really long time. I know some people in the military, and one of their biggest complaints is that the yoga practices they find for beginners are way too slow, and they don't need to hear about how their head should be over their shoulders, should be over their pelvis, should be over their heart. They don't want to hear about that. So keep in mind that just because you're new to yoga doesn't mean you need a beginner practice. I'd suggest that if you have been doing exercise before and you think you have a pretty basic understanding of alignment and things like that, try a little bit harder of a practice. I'm not saying try the most advanced practice out there, but try something that looks fun. It's really important that your first experience with yoga should be fun, especially if you plan on pursuing this as something you do constantly. And I will say that even if you're super advanced, go back to beginner practices occasionally just to relearn that alignment. Once you've started realizing what you like about yoga and things like that, you can go to a beginner's practice, take a moment to do all of those things, and maybe during the parts where you go, I can probably do something else, you can do modifications and insert your own pose. However, I only recommend doing this with a video. Please do not go into a class and start doing things that the instructor has not told you to do. So here are a few more tips on where you are in your practice and how maybe you might want to pick your yoga practice. One of the big things, if you're already flexible like I was, you might want to work on a practice that targets strength a bit more right now. If you still want to work on flexibility, absolutely find practices that work on flexibility, or both. But just keep in mind that if you're already flexible, working on strength is a really good thing for you right now. Conversely, if you're super strong, you might be super tight, so find a practice that's going to target flexibility. Totally make my husband do yoga, and he's super strong and can do all sorts of things, but forget about putting his hands on the ground. But you also have to find the right practice for yourself. Don't be afraid to try things. That's one of the biggest things I'm gonna say about yoga with an injury. Though do keep in mind that if you really don't think you can do something, don't do it. Don't feel like you have to try every single thing just because, oh, I should try it before I say I can't do it. You need to keep your body safe first and foremost. If you're pretty new to yoga and you have an injury, definitely start with more basic practices. Again, not necessarily a beginner practice, but just something that you have the option to do modifications or skip poses or something like that. Also, if you have an injury, don't be afraid to try a pose, realize it doesn't work, and come out of that pose safely and slowly. Coming out of a pose really quickly can actually aggravate your injury further, but if you're super in pain and you just need to fall over, you don't really have a choice. Sometimes there's one pose that I will literally fall out of if I try to do. Also, keep in mind, just because there's one pose you can't do doesn't mean that there aren't more poses with similar benefits that you can either pair together or just do on their own to, end up with a very similar result, if not exactly the same. A lot of standing poses have very similar counterparts that you can do on the ground. I've seen practices which were completely standing that I literally could have created a very similar ground practice. This goes for anyone too, so don't just tune out because I'm talking about injuries and you think you're totally safe. There are probably poses that you'll find are totally weird because you're either not flexible enough, not strong enough, not comfortable, or whatever. There's options, and there are ways to work to get to that pose without actually doing that pose. Finally, and this is super important for people who are super flexible, super strong, and have injuries, and just about anyone else, modifications are your friend. Long story short, there are bolsters, there are blocks, and there are blankets, and you can modify pretty much every single pose. So finally, just figure out why you're doing yoga. Like I said, if you're super flexible, strong, or have injuries, there's still a lot of options out to you. If you want a yoga for a calming practice, there's a lot of relaxing and restorative yoga as well, where you're not necessarily going to be focused on bodybuilding or getting your foot behind your head. So I'm pretty much going to end this video by telling you that the biggest way to figure out what practice you want to do is figuring out what you need out of your practice. Maybe you're not really looking for something specific and you just want to enjoy some yoga and do every single possible routine you can, which I'd actually encourage you to no matter what. It's just sometimes you want to keep certain things in mind. So really the key to figuring out what practice is right for you is understanding your own body and your lifestyle. And sometimes you can't figure out a lot of that stuff until you've just tried a bunch of yoga. Maybe you don't know you're super flexible compared to how strong you are. Go ahead and try a few practices, see how they work, and see what you feel like you need to work on. There are so many different types of yoga out there and so many more different routines and practices and instructors that you can work with. So keep trying out different instructors and different practices before you settle on one or before you think you found one that's right for you. So like I said, you really want to figure out why you're doing yoga, and that will help you figure out what kind of practice you want to do every day or every weekend or once a month, whenever you end up doing yoga. So really what I wanted to do with this video was kind of give you a list of questions to ask yourself. Pretty much, why are you doing yoga to begin with? what kind of limitations do you have, and is there something in specific you want to target? Those are the three big things, but there's probably more things you might want to ask yourself, like what do you expect to get out of yoga? What kind of instructor are you looking for? And are you looking for a community around it? So how about you leave a comment down below, tell me why you're doing yoga or something along those lines. Any advice you have for people who are curious about doing yoga? Maybe leave it down there as well. I'm sure there's loads more advice that people could give, and I know there's a whole long list of reasons to do yoga, things to consider, so definitely just start leaving comments down below about what you think and your experiences, or just why you want to try it. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. That always really helps us out. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more from me. It's the best way for YouTube to let you know if I've released any more videos. Namaste.